Hi, everyone. My name is Phil Quillwater. I'm an account executive with CDW Canada on the enterprise sales team. We're going to get kicked off here. Just want to thank everyone for joining us this Friday afternoon to learn more about CDW's new pilot program for the Windows Virtual Desktop. I'll be your Vanna White / pretty face for this call today, so lots of these there. We'll hold all questions to the end. You can add them into the chat, and I'll be going over those with the team at the end of this webinar. So on this webinar, we're going to dive into why Azure Windows Virtual Desktop, why Windows Virtual Desktop versus traditional VDI solutions, scope of our pilot program and proof of concept along with prerequisites for this. And with that, I would like to introduce Larissa Circo, our Cloud Practice Lead for the East, and Nicholas Ray, who is our Cloud Solution Architect with CDW Canada. Thanks.
We know that you are working through a lot at this point in time, and we're here to support you. As part of the solutions team, we were originally Scalar in 2019 and acquired by CDW. And so that's the team that myself and Nicholas Ray were previously part of, and now part of CDW from a services organization perspective. As you know, CDW is very well versed in the market. We have a number of experienced staff, including both sales and a large technical bench, especially with the acquisition of Scalar. And so we can help you through a number of problems, whether it's your traditional data center to cloud to security and so on and so forth. We have a number of locations across Canada. Myself and the team on the call are part of the Toronto office, but basically we have an office everywhere there is a hockey team and a couple extra. And so with that, we'll get into the WBD Production Accelerator and a bit about what that looks like for you. So why Cloud VDI? We have, we all know the traditional VDI solution, fairly bulky in terms of implementation from an on-prem perspective. And so there's a lot of planning that goes with that and, time for hardware, time for setup, et cetera, time for training, et cetera, et cetera. And so I know our customers today especially are looking for something that is quick and easy to stand up, doesn't require a lot of overhead, can get this rolled out to their broader employees fairly quickly. And so that's really one of the main reasons at this very moment we're looking at a cloud option. It'll also let you scale across globally if you have a global company that you're working with. And in terms of delivery, it's a simplified process. It doesn't really take that much in terms of uplift, but there are a number of components that you do need to understand to be able to do the deployments. The other main reasons, especially on a Windows perspective, there's the Windows 10 multi-session that you can take advantage of as part of a cloud option. And in terms of why Azure Windows Virtual Desktop, so this is the Microsoft version of VDI. And with that, it is actually running on Azure and looking at, and within that environment, you wouldn't have the management that you would normally have on premises. So reduced management efforts within that. You get a lot of efficiencies when it comes to cloud and leveraging, as I mentioned, Windows 10 multi-session, which we'll go into another slide in a few slides. In terms of cost effectiveness, you can scale out the virtual machines as you require. You can also shut them down during off-peak hours, which you can't really do when you have on-prem hardware. and the scalability to go global in just a few minutes and add users on demand as required. It also allows you to have, with that, a decreased latency for those users. So for those who really need to ensure that their desktop as a service is reliable and not latent for best user experience, a cloud option is really a great one to look at. Nick, did you want to go into a little bit of traditional VDI versus how WBD does multi-session?
No, absolutely, not a problem, Larissa. So basically, in the traditional VDI world, if you do happen to, have Windows 10 images there, it's pretty much a one-to-one mapping. And one of the advantage here for WVD, Microsoft WVD, I should say, it allows it's actually a true multi-session Windows 10 experience. In for example, Citrix or any other traditional VDI environment on-prem, it typically for you to achieve a multi-session image is pretty much a Windows server with the desktop experience installed on top of that. So with this solution here is actually a Windows 10 client you have access to, and you could leverage that multi-session experience there for your users. The benefits here is that you can have multiple users access in that image, and also that if there's a specific application that requires the Windows 10 operating system, this is where you typically would benefit from this here. And this is only available for the Windows 10 and not Windows 7. Just want to call that out.
So when looking for partners in this space, I can say we've done a number of deployments. The solution for Microsoft WBD came out in 2018, and there's not a huge number of partners in the market doing this deployment. We have a number of experiences now with the solution, and so we can look to support you in your rollout fairly quickly. We've actually got a pre-canned offering that I'll go through in a little bit, just based on that experience. We're also part of a new program Microsoft has rolled out, specifically because they're seeing the uptick in the market at this very point in time. And we can help evaluate if you are available to use that funding program, which has the ability to use up to $20K for professional services work. There are some requirements as part of that, and so myself and the team can help walk you through those and to make sure that you are eligible for that funding. In terms of our certifications and bench, we have Microsoft, a number of Microsoft certifications on the team, as well our solution architects are certified within Azure and are ready to support you within these conversations. One of the big things about WVD is looking at the prerequisites. You should have an Azure subscription. If not, at CDW, we can definitely help you set one up, but we will need that to get started. Whether or not you choose to do a CSP type model or add it onto your EA, we will need to put it within a subscription environment. You also need to ensure that you have your Active Directory set up. And Nick, actually, maybe you can talk to the Active Directory and domain controller requirements, and then I'll end with the licensing.
Absolutely, not a problem. Yeah, so definitely there are certain prerequisites that must be there in order for us to deploy the solution for you. Azure subscription is one. Obviously, an Active Directory setup that could be a legacy Active Directory domain services, or it could also be Azure Active Directory services as well. Domain controller, definitely you would want to deploy a domain controller in the environment if there's a lot of authentication that is being done there. And optionally, if your image does need to access any on-premises resources, in Azure, there are several ways you could establish a connectivity there, and that could be done through an express route circuit or a site-to-site VPN. In terms of licensing, Lucy, you may want to touch on that, but definitely there's an overlay on the O365 piece as well, how we could benefit on that aspect.
For sure. So just to quickly touch on the Express Route, if you don't have Express Route today, just to let you know, you're likely not going to set it up in a quick amount of time as an option. That might be something you want to do in a phase 2, phase 3 approach. If this is a solution that you're going to go look at long term and need basically an M2S network back to your on-prem environment. In terms of the biggest uplift from a licensing perspective, it's best to review if you have the correct Windows 7 or 10 licensing, whether it's incorporated in your Office 365 licensing package that you have today or M365. That is a very key point to review with your Microsoft account exec, which we have at CDW, to ensure that you have today. So in terms of our WBD Production Accelerator program, we have, this is a 5-day engagement, basically. It's approximately about $13K, but based on what we've seen with our other customers, with some of the customizations that we've seen needed, because they might not have certain components within a setup today. On average, our professional services work has been between 15 and 20K if you're looking for an estimated budget. And that's a configuration of 10 users at minimum. We can look at expanding that out to 25 plus, whatever you might need. And the reason we're calling this a production accelerator is because you can actually turn this into a production environment. It's really just a quick get start program for you. Initially, we did call it a pilot, but we've changed that just because we didn't want customers to think that there was a lot of uplift for them to do to get it into production. And so in the phases that we've got, the first is really reviewing any existing VDI environment that you might have. We'll gather the prereqs that you have for your application and any image requirements and ensure that we have everything set for your deployment. We'll then configure your components within the Azure environment and get the host pool up for the 10 instances. And your team basically will get ready for any testing they want to do. So testing is out of scope for this accelerator. We generally request clients to do that as they will know best what they need or what to expect within their environment. And then we transfer the project over back to the customer with knowledge transfer and a run book. Basically, if you choose to destroy the environment after this testing, you're free to do so or transition it into production. So that's something that we hand back over to the customer in the end. So like I said, customizations are possible, and we can contact, so you can contact your account manager if you have any more questions, or Phil on the call is happy to direct you to the appropriate person that might support you. Nick, is there anything else that you want to say around the accelerator and the project that we have for customers?
Sure. Definitely would like to touch a bit on this as well, and I'm sure there might be some technical questions afterwards. Keep in mind, in this engagement is just tailored for one host pool. I know in various environments that you may have, what did I say, offshore users or engineering users or the typical admin workers. So we could certainly tailor, connect with you if there is an appetite. We could create several host pool based off of what your existing VDI requirements may be. So it's pretty much that this could be tailored to your environment, not only just one host pool, but it could be something like for AutoCAD users or remote developers and so forth.
Perfect. And so as Nick said, we're happy to answer any questions. I know there is a list that came initially that we'll probably go through first, and Phil will ask it of myself and Nick. But we expect that customers on the call will want to go through potentially more of a deeper technical overview. And so happy to do those as well, but hoping to get through most of the questions on today's call so that you guys are willing and have all the information that you need to get started as soon as possible. Phil, I'll pass it to you.
Awesome. Those of you that do have questions, there's a chat box in WebEx for you to submit those, so I will review those, but I have a few questions for you guys already. First question, is this essentially a Microsoft flavor of VDI?
Yes, it is.
Yep, basically.
Awesome. Next question, how does this solution compare to Citrix VDI in terms of performance?
In terms of performance, it all depends on what you're comparing that against. If it's a traditional on-premises Citrix farm, then it would all vary based off of what type of hardware you have on-prem. If it's Citrix Cloud, it's pretty much going to be the same performance, or VMware Horizon as well. I just want to call that out. Citrix Cloud is Azure at the in the back end. So if you're to deploy a compute instance, you have access to that compute instance in WBD as well. So in terms of performance, it's pretty much the same experience there. Just having to keep in mind to choose the right compute instance for your host pool.
Next question, does the virtual desktop run on RDP, HyperV, or Citrix?
RDP, yes. In terms of HyperV, that's actually a virtualization platform. So I should say it may be HyperV in the background, but it's pretty much at Microsoft Azure. It does not run on Citrix, but there is an integration there with Citrix Cloud in that aspect.
Next question. Can you explain the difference between Azure Labs and Dev Test Labs in this offering?
So for Azure Labs and Dev Test Labs, I'm not too sure what exactly you're trying to get at there. There is Azure Dev Test, which is a separate subscription and service you could leverage from Microsoft Azure there. In terms of leveraging this environment for tests, absolutely, you could certainly create test pools for your developers to test application packaging or any form of testing there that you may require.
Okay, and next question. How can I leverage this for employees traveling overseas to access corporate resources?
One of the advantages here is that the WBD solution is accessible over the internet. You could also add an additional layer on top of that for multi-factor authentication. So it is accessible on the internet in various locations and regions, I should say.
Awesome. And on to the next question. When would the Management Hub be available in the Azure portal?
So right now, most of the management is done through PowerShell. However, you do have an option to deploy a Azure web app, a web application on your Azure subscription, and that allows you for a better management and user experience. So in terms of making changes to your tenant, modifying your host pools, or just general day-to-day activities there, or testing, you could certainly leverage that web app for operational activities.
Awesome. A few more questions here. Why should I go with Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop and not with Citrix and Desktop?
So it all depends. If you already have Citrix in the environment, you can certainly extend that out into WVD. It's not a complete replacement of a VDI solution. Keep in mind, Citrix and Microsoft, they do have a strong partnership there. So on Citrix Cloud, you can certainly extend that integration to Microsoft WVD. So it's not really a full comparison for VDI solution.
Next question. Are there any known restrictions accessing the solution from certain regions, say Middle East/Africa?
For here, you certainly could leverage, because this is tightly integrated with Microsoft Azure Active Directory. You could implement things like conditional access there so that you could only have certain whitelisted IP addresses that are accessing your services. So It is globally available for you to access the service. However, you can certainly increase your security posture by adding conditional access rules and multi-factor authentication if the restriction is if there's a requirement to restricting certain IP addresses or regions.
Okay, and what type of infrastructure is required to support a fluid desktop experience?
Typically, it all depends. If you already have your on-premises infrastructure and you're starting out greenfield, then obviously you will need to establish that Azure base landing zone and all the supporting components that are required. So, so to answer your question there, it's very minimal prerequisites there, but if you already have an Azure footprint, that would make things much more easier instead of deploying AD Connect and Azure AD.
Do we have any use cases for DR/BC?
For this environment here, because it's running on top of Azure, you do have the option to deploy host pools across various regions in Azure. So for example, the WBD service itself, the tenant, it's a SaaS service, just like Office 365, but your actual your resources, you have the ability to, in terms of a DR standpoint, you have the ability to deploy host pools across various regions that Azure offers. For example, you could have host pools in Canada Central as well as Canada East. So in the event of catastrophic failure in that region, you could still have the ability to service your end users images across on the secondary region.
Next question is, how much per month for a staff machine?
That's a good question there, Phil. It all depends on the type of compute instance that you will have for your users. So they have various flavors there. And also there's a licensing component on top of that. But typically on average for basic administrative users, you're probably looking at around $35 to $40 per user a month. And that's taken into consideration. There are ways you could optimize your spending by turning off the virtual images when not being used after hours. So certainly we could advise a bit more granular there on costing specific to your environment and what your current license model is there.
Okay, so we'll do a few more questions and then we can give everybody back some time on a Friday afternoon. So the next question is, are there any servers required on site or is this cloud only?
It could be a cloud-only solution, or it could also be a hybrid solution. So in a traditional environment, you most likely will have your data center with Active Directory, your file servers, your SQL, and any line of business apps. If you want to build this out, definitely there will be an Azure subscription, a site-to-site VPN, establishing that domain controller, creating a new image, assigning license, and deploying your host pools, and that's pretty much it. So that's a hybrid solution. There's also a cloud-only version where net new build, you're leveraging everything. You will be deploying all of your resources in Azure. So that includes having Azure Directory Services, or you can have a traditional domain controller running as an IaaS VM. There will be AD Connect. There will be some sort of licensing component there as well, and it could just be all native cloud.
Awesome. Can Windows Virtual Desktop be provisioned using free trial subscription as a test?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Cost to implement?
Cost to implement, well, it varies. As Larissa did mention, we do have that accelerator program right now, which is roughly around $13K. That includes one host pool for a maximum of 10 users. However, we certainly could that could vary based off of how many host pools you would like to have. If you do require some sort of performance benchmark testing, and in terms of AutoCAD or Revit or just any traditional apps that you may want to perform some testing against your images.
Yeah. And it doesn't have the licensing piece, so that doesn't include the consumption that you should expect, as well as any Windows licensing that you might need.
Awesome. And this is probably going to be the last question. Are CAD capable images available?
CAD, I mean, are you talking about CAD as in AutoCAD or CAD as in Canadian? Um,
I'm probably Canadian.
right. Off the market.
AutoCAD.
Okay.
Sorry, AutoCAD.
Oh, AutoCAD.
Yeah. So off the marketplace, no. Certainly you could build your own image, or we could assist you in building that image out. So to answer your question, CAD capable images are available. I think you meant compute instances. So right now we currently have a project in flight where we are leveraging the NVV4 image for AutoCAD. So you have the full access of Microsoft compute images there. So yes.
Awesome. And I think that was the remainder of the questions. So at this time, I think we can give everybody back that half hour. So I want to thank everybody for joining. Please reach out to your CDW account executive or account manager. If you are unsure of who that is, please reach out to myself at phil.clowater@cdw.ca, and I will connect you with the appropriate team member to schedule a technical deep dive. Thanks everybody for joining.